This is Jim from Portage M&A Advisory, and you're listening to the Selling Successfully podcast, the show that simplifies selling your business for those thinking about moving into the next chapter of life. If you like what you hear, please follow or subscribe to find us easily and listen again. We're here when you need us. Today we're talking about M&A lawyers. Joining me today is Kevin Fernandes from KMB Law. He's a partner there, and he's part of the M&A and private equity group. Thanks for joining me, Kevin.
Jim, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for having KMB, and it's a real joy to be here with you and your team.
I appreciate it. And for those listening, we've done some work with Kevin and the firm. We've had a joint client, and I can say I'm really looking forward to this episode in particular because a lot of people don't really realize the importance of an M&A lawyer. We've talked in previous episodes about deal teams and the importance of a deal team. Today, we're really going to weave in the legal part of it, and really excited to get your take and your perspective on, having a specialist join the deal team. So I appreciate your insight today. I've heard your position described as stressful but exhilarating. Would you say that's accurate?
It's not far off. They say if you enjoy what you do, you'll have a lot of passion for it. And we really enjoy what we do. At KMB, we work with owner-managers typically. So we really focus on decision makers, family-owned businesses, real relationships. And so when you're doing work for people who are the decision maker and parties that are affected by a transaction, it makes the work so much more rewarding. Not saying other work isn't, but it brings a certain level of joy. So the stress doesn't really hurt as much or impact as much when there's a great result that can be achieved for your client.
Right. So it's probably not that different than our role as an M&A advisor, where we're working with them through the bumps and hurdles. And when you get to the finish line, you get to celebrate with them. Would you say that's similar to your journey with the client?
Very similar. And that goes back to the concept of a deal team. I think of us as a deal team. Right. We're together with accountants, bankers, wealth advisors, evaluators. Different people bring different skill sets to the team, and we like to think of ourselves as part of that team. We are not the team. We want to work collaboratively to ride the highs, but also help work through the lows, because challenges come up during transactions, as you know, and it's not really what you say about them, but how you react to them and come out of them. I think that's really the important thing. And a strong team can do that.
Right. And we're going to get into the nitty gritty in terms of, some of the legal aspects of it. But talk to me a little bit about your passion for this sort of thing and, some of the relationships you develop, maybe a story or an anecdote, perhaps.
Absolutely. So one of my favorite stories is about a client that found out about a transaction in a bit of a backwards way. So he had worked at this business for about 10 years, and he came to every day, let's say with his lunch pail, and he was there, and one day he gets a letter. And that letter says, "Hey, it's been really good, Joe, but we're closing up shop. Stay with me, we'll make it worth your while, but we'll be done in about 6 months." And Joe says, "Well, that's odd. Been here for 10 years. Put my sandwich back in the fridge. I'm going to walk down to Steve's office." Walks down to Steve's office. "Hey, Steve, what's this?" As you see him, "I'm going to be hanging it. It's been a good run. I'm going to be hanging it up." "But why? Why would you? It's a really good business. Why would you want to hang it up?" "I can't find anyone to take over for me." And Joe said, "What about me?" Steve said, "What about you?" "Well, I've been here for 10 years with my lunch pail. Give me a try." And that guy went out, and he went to the bank, and he went through the process. He got financing. He took out a mortgage on his own home to bring the portion that he had to contribute, brought his savings in. That's the kind of passion that's really exciting, and he did the deal. He's not a business owner. He had worked in the business, but he knew the business. He knew the customers, the relationships, the work. He enjoyed coming to work, and now he's enjoying building it in his own image and building on that family legacy. And we find that's really important, because that passion will help you bring energy to your business and help to grow what was in one spot into something that's maybe tenfold that.
Right.
That to me is a really exciting story. It doesn't happen all the time. We do transactions where, nope, here it is, it's in a box, paper it up. We do transactions where we're involved with the structuring. But as long as there's passion involved, that really makes it worthwhile and makes us want to come to the office every day.
Yeah, it's a great story, and I appreciate you sharing that because we've heard similar stories. And obviously, for your client Joe, he's now a business owner, and he continues to operate, I would imagine. And for the seller, it's positive for him as well, right? He probably got something out of the deal, and the alternative was him hanging it up and not getting anything. That's fantastic.
Well, it was a fantastic allocation of risk and reward. That was what we like to see in the transaction. So we've talked a few times about how does the plate go? What does the pie look like? Well, there was a certain amount of equity or money brought by the buyer. They took from their own savings, their own home, and putting some money to the table. The bank brought a lot of it. And so obviously the purchaser's on the line for that. They can guarantee it and do all that good stuff. But the vendor also said, I believe in you. And they also put some money in by way of a vendor take back. So everyone kind of shared some of that risk reward and hoping that everyone will do well. The bank wants the client to do well and grow, bring new facilities, bring new work, be a success story for them. The purchaser wants to be a success story in terms of growing the business going forward, and the vendor wants to continue on their legacy. I think everyone, both monetarily and spiritually, or that's an interesting way of putting it, but feel good wise, everyone feels good about the transaction. And that one was hard also because we act for buyers and for sellers. So there's unique drivers both ways in terms of motivators and where do we look. Sometimes finding a business is hard to do. If you're a motivated buyer, you're searching for a potential target business to acquire, an industry you're interested in, a strategic, that can be hard to do, right? If you don't have the right advisors at the table like yourselves, it can be hard to do. So we encourage clients to talk to people like you early. If you want to buy a business, you want to sell a business, talk to people who do this for a living every day, but do it early.
Right.
But on the vendor side, it might also be hard to go, who might I even target? It's overwhelming. I'm trying to run my business. How am I supposed to focus on this and run a business and sell a business? And I'm overwhelmed. And we helped the clients to bring those advisors to the table, like yourselves, bankers, wealth advisors, et cetera, accountants for tax planning, so that they can make an informed decision and decide what transaction will be best for them, whether it's internally being a family member, whether it's internally an employee, a management buyout, whether it's a strategic in their industry or a third-party buyer, private equity. I think having those conversations early can help people like Joe rise to the top, can help a potential strategic rise to the top. And we really enjoy working with your team for things like that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So, Kevin, let me dive into some of the specifics here. I think we're all familiar, as business owners, we have a corporate lawyer. I want to drill into specialized M&A lawyers and what that really means. Why would a seller or a business owner or buyer perhaps seek M&A specific specialization in a lawyer?
We get that question quite often. And in our practice, about 65 to 70% of our practice is doing private M&A transactions. So at any one time, we probably have between 3 and 5 transactions on the go between buy and sell side.
Right.
We see what's going on. We see the allocation of risk and reward. We see what is market regularly, and it's deal tested. So finding an M&A lawyer like ourselves that focuses on the space is important. That doesn't mean you have to lose your corporate lawyer relationship. You may know that lawyer really, really well, and they can continue doing work after the transaction for you. A good M&A lawyer can help you with the transaction and then help you continue on in whatever capacity you need to.
Gotcha. Now, would you say this is similar to, let's say, the medical profession where you have a GP as your doctor? They see you for an annual checkup, but if you have, let's say, heart issue, you want to go see a specialist and you can plug in that specialist. Perhaps you've got, heart issues and you need a surgery. You don't want your GP doing it. You want someone who does this day in, day out.
I think that's a great analogy. And I think it's also important to focus on the efficiency, the speed, the ability to really hone on the issue work on that transaction, help you move on to the next phase of your life and your career. A specialist can help you do that and then get you back on track to continue your life. It'll be the quickest way to do so.
Right. And I would say from our perspective too, one of the greatest risks in getting a deal closed is the legal piece, right? And ensuring that lawyers on both, the buyer's side and the seller's side are strategic. They're looking at the big picture. They're looking at the risk reward, as you mentioned, but they're also saying, hey, listen, how do we get to the finish line? How do we protect our clients? But let's not lose sight of the bigger picture at the end of the day.
Exactly. We're a firm built on being practical. Because we work with owner managers, because we're talking to the decision makers who are also running the business, they want a practical solution. They want context. Does this matter? If I give this up, how can I gain something elsewhere so that everyone wins? I think having that focus, that practicality, allows the transaction to move forward. And we also focus on not being the business decision makers. We try not to mix up business decisions with legal decisions.
Right.
They're different issues. Both decisions are made by the clients, but the context above are different. We can provide commentary on liability and risk, structuring, but at the end of the day, we're just trying to empower the business owner to make their decision and move forward.
Right. And from my experience, there's no one way of doing it. There's no cookie cutter. There's always complexities. There's nuances. And here I've got a bit of a list that you provided us in terms of the top items, right, that you guys would specialize. We got specialized legal expertise and guidance where you can navigate complexities. And I think we're going to get into this, but oftentimes a deal is going to have employment challenges. There's going to be some other difficulties with contract law. There could be joint ventures. There could be complexities beyond what let's call it a corporate lawyer does on a day-to-day basis. Is that kind of a critical piece too, is having folks at your disposal that you can go and talk to about these sorts of things?
The analogy we use, Jim, is out of the quarterback, although you can probably tell I couldn't throw a football. My life depended upon it. But the analogy is the relationship is with us. Meaning, if I'm working on the transaction, I have the client relationship, I will talk to the client. And when the specialist is needed, if there's an issue, I'll help identify it and bring in the appropriate specialist at the office. So at K&B, we have intellectual property support, leasing, litigation, employment law, et cetera, to support with the transaction, but also to support afterwards with estate planning, to deal with family law issues that may arise. So the client is supported, but they have one person they can kind of work with and be comfortable with. On our end, though, we bring a lot of expertise as well. So in terms of structuring and risk assessment, in terms of due diligence, in terms of knowing the process of the transaction from early stages LOI through post-closing adjustments, we make sure that the client is informed, communicated with, and understood so that it's a smooth process for them. We certainly want to make sure that the negotiation follows those milestones and guideposts so that there's no surprises. Right. There's no fun in having any surprises. In litigation, there's no surprises. In transactions, there shouldn't be either. We try to make sure things are done in a way to provide certainty for clients.
So let's pivot here, Kevin. Similar to M&A firms, not all M&A firms are equal. And same with lawyers. When it comes to M&A lawyers or people that deal with transactional law, what should sellers be looking for? What's a high-level checklist of some of the items they should be asking or looking for when they're looking at firms?
First one that comes to mind is experience. So as an example, our firm has been around for 43 or so years. We were based in the GTA West, based in Mississauga. We have offices in Markham and Burlington. So we really support business owners in those communities and been around for a long time doing this. As an example, within that experience, there comes a level of expertise. So we have a dedicated M&A team. All our team does is have the ability to parachute in to work on transactions. And because we work on both buy side and vendor side transactions, we see various mechanisms, issues, strategies come up that we can help to deploy for your transaction. So experience is the first thing. I think the second thing is also approach. So when you're interviewing, whether it's through a relationship or just a cold call, ensuring that there's a relationship that is strong and comfortable is really important. When we meet clients, we are also interviewing clients to make sure there's a fit, because we don't want to necessarily start a relationship with not a good bedrock. Right. So there's good communication, there's timeliness, there's appropriate urgency, there is practicality both ways. So we're looking for relationships with clients that will support what we need to do so we can deliver results for them.
Right.
And I think the final thing is being able to look at someone and say, I can identify with you. You are a person that I would want to have a beer with or a coffee with, and we just happen to be doing a transaction. That's a lot of what we try to do at the firm. We are people who have families, are in the community, are involved the same way you are. We just happen to practice law and you happen to run a business. If we can come together on those pieces, there's a great chance that we're going to have a good relationship based on experience to achieve results.
So let me ask you a question. And we get this a lot when we say, hey, do you have a lawyer? We're dealing with our client, let's say on the sell side. We say, hey, do you have a lawyer? Let's bring Uncle Bob into the equation here. Uncle Bob has been their corporate lawyer for 30 years. Uncle Bob knows them, has a relationship with them. They drink beer together. Uncle Bob has also been asked if he's done deals, and of course he's done deals. You know, he's a good lawyer. He's been doing this for 30 years. What sort of question should someone be asking? Because what we typically say is, that's great. What percentage of time are they spending on deals? How do you typically navigate that piece?
It comes back to the percentage of work that we do. So about 70% of our practice is doing private M&A on an ongoing basis.
Right.
I keep a little notebook, keep the ongoing deals in there. The other work that we do supports doing deals.
Right.
So it's not like the other 30% I'm tap dancing. Our team is also working on structuring. So we do general corporate commercial work, whether it's setting up purchase vehicles, other operating vehicles, helping people restructure their businesses in a tax optimal way in order to be attractive for sale, et cetera. That's the corporate commercial component we're doing.
Right.
We're helping them manage those relationships for potential buyers. And we also help people with raising capital. So sometimes people want to do an accredited investor raise, a friend's family, close business associate raise, or an ESOP for employees to incentivize people. Usually those pieces, that raise, is in support of a business need. I want to keep incentivized, I need capital. All of those pieces go very hand in hand with doing transactions. I think it provides a full complement for a client. Now, back to your question of what should I be asking? How should I know? If you focus on deals on a regular basis, you have a flow to doing it. We understand clients have lots of different needs. We have a wonderful real estate team. We have a wonderful employment law team, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll bring in those experts or send pieces off to them as need be, not only for your transaction, but for our clients generally. So it frees up our team's ability to parachute in and work on the transaction and really focus on it.
Right. So to summarize, if I'm calling around looking for a lawyer, I've got Uncle Bob. At the end of the day, I should be asking myself, listen, this is the most important transaction of my life. I want someone who does this day in, day out. You don't know what you don't know. We want to make sure that there's more resources at that firm. Maybe Uncle Bob is a sole practitioner in a smaller town. Let's make sure that there's other folks at the firm who can help. Are there any other items that should be on the list, or would you say those are the key pieces?
I think those are the key pieces, but I think you should not be afraid to ask, what are some of the challenges that lawyers work through, and what were the solutions provided? So quite often, we've talked to people who are like, I'm really struggling with dealing with this issue. There's a lot of customer concentration. How do I deal with that risk? Because purchasers want, well, as we know, repeatability of results. Oh, it's tied up in one or two customers, so I'm really concerned. How do we deal with this? I've heard about something called an earnout. What is this VTB? How do I deal with the bank? Those kind of challenges come up on a regular basis, and we can provide solutions based upon what we see in other transactions and by our ability to be creative and practical.
Right.
So asking us those questions or asking the lawyer that you're talking to those questions will help you fire test whether that experience is actually there.
Right.
That's really important.
So, Kevin, let's drill into some other things that sellers or business owners may look to when they're looking to sell their business. We've come across some rankings called Lexpert and Chambers. What are they and how much weight should we give them?
So Lexpert and Chambers, Best Lawyers, those are all examples of peer review analytics about what others in the industry are saying about your collegiality, your skills, et cetera, as a lawyer. A lot of lawyers are ranked, and we have at KNB lots of lawyers that are ranked. And that's a great thing. It means that we're around, we're experienced, and people are recognizing what we do. They tend to be reviews that are predominantly for larger transactions. So there's similar ones in the States where you see large M&A firms, merger market, et cetera. But really where we shine is again, those relationship pieces. So we're members, for example, of the Burlington Chamber of Commerce, Oakville Chamber, the Mississauga Board of Trade, and have been for years. We're out in the community. We have lots of clients in the industry, and a lot of referrals actually come from people who have experience with us.
Right.
So someone had a successful sale or a purchase transaction. They say, you know what, you should work with so-and-so. That's where we get a lot of our ongoing work. Or we have repeat buyers and sellers.
Right.
So typically more on the buyer side to buying more businesses. There's strategic acquisitions. That first transaction went well. You were able to provide a good landscape, and the transaction followed the steps you outlined. A lot of people like that, and it works really well. Rankings are there, but they're not everything. The important thing is finding someone, if possible, that's worked with your law firm and who can walk you through the process and their experience, because it's a pretty good indicator. Past experience is a really good indicator of future results.
Right.
I'd say those are probably more important indicators than maybe the reviews that are out there, but they never hurt. We don't mind a good review.
So, Kevin, let's talk about the timing. We've talked about the deal team. When do we bring in the M&A expert lawyer? Obviously, some of the pushback that we hear is, as soon as we start talking to the lawyer, the clock's ticking, we're going to be spending money. But when do you think the ideal time is to bring in the lawyer?
Well, the answer is as soon as you're comfortable, and then go back 6 months, which is a really hard metric to have because you never know when that's going to be. What I mention is, as you work through things with us, we try to front load a lot of relationship discussion, often on a complimentary basis, to ensure that people are comfortable with us.
Right.
And one of the things, for example, if you're a vendor, you're marketing yourself out to potential buyers. You're talking about your structure, you're talking about repeatability results, et cetera. We can help early on in the process, not only with your planning component, with your wealth managers, tax advisory, et cetera, your M&A advisory firm, but we can also help you look the strongest and best, most complete for when you go out. For example, if you're selling the shares of a business, it's important that the shares are actually existing for the business. It sounds like a trite comment, but a lot of times people say, I have some burgundy block binder somewhere, I think. That's kind of really important to a transaction. And for corporate authority and all the things that I get excited about at the office, helping to get those things in place early before you're really in the weeds and the throes of a transaction can really make the process go a lot smoother and cheaper.
Right.
So we get involved months beforehand in order to help you clean up those types of things. The transaction we worked on, we helped to do that because it helped people go forward and say, I've got a really good bedrock. I can help build up from here.
Right.
So it's not that it will cost more money to do it earlier. It's the opposite. If you plan early and give more time, it actually ends up costing less.
Right. And in a perfect world, I think that makes sense. I mean, I look at the deal team as a group of individuals who are working strategically together. They're collaborative. They're sharing information. When you talk about tax planning, for instance, you're talking about restructuring oftentimes, multiplying the capital gains exemption by creating trusts. That would probably be good for you to know and be a part of. When you talk about the minute book and due diligence, obviously having a minute book that's up to date would be pretty prudent prior to going to market. So, if I understand this correctly, being part of the process before you go to market, before the plan is set, the go-to-market plan, that would make a lot of sense.
It does. And it can be an ongoing conversation. It's not something that starts overnight. Quite often, in our experience, we'll get on calls early with Portage. And often it's done in a way just to kind of make sure the client knows that they're supported. This is the biggest decision, or one of the biggest decisions that going through. You don't want to go at it alone. You want to know there's people there to support you. And I find that quite often gives people a lot of comfort and confidence to move forward in a strong way.
Right. So with respect to, the financial advisor being part of the deal team, oftentimes we want to make sure that, their piece is done, before we get involved, because obviously they're making some assumptions about, is it a share sale, is it an asset sale? Do they have enough to fund retirement? It's no different. I mean, you probably want to be looped in at that point too. So you have a say in terms of what makes sense, right? Can the shares be sold? We've been in situations where the shares can't be sold. You and I were on a joint case where that was, that was the piece. And it would really impact the client at the end of the day if they did some tax planning because the assets are being sold. So would you say, being part of the deal team well in advance, talking to the financial advisor, talking to the tax accountant, all that sort of thing, is really important?
Absolutely. Having the ability to be present and offer thoughts is important. Sometimes the best thoughts are no thoughts. Thanks for involving us. We'll pick it up at a different stage. But it also speaks to the transaction life cycle. So the transaction life cycle is planning, executing, and post-closing integration and transition. We're also involved with clients as need be for their estate planning needs, but also for their post-closing business ventures. Lots of clients say, I worked really hard to build this business. I bump my knees a lot of times. I have experience. I now have some new capital. I'd like to invest in other business. That goes back to that investing work that we help clients with, that exempt market PE work that we do. There's a lot of really exciting businesses in the GTA West that need support. And often business owners say, I close my transaction, I want to help someone else. And we'll get involved to help with that as well.
What can I say? I mean, we love working with M&A lawyers. We get excited when we're part of a deal where we have the experts at the table, we're collaborative, and we're all strategic. Because we're passionate about getting the deal to the finish line, as are you, right? And I think it makes it easy for all of us. If we're all working for a common interest and a common goal, I think the outcome is always going to be more favorable, and the client is going to be much more impressed that there's been collaboration and strategic thinking. And as is always the case, there's always emotion involved as well. So I think having, a seller surrounded by perspectives, different opinions, however, with one common goal will keep them in line, and the emotion, it's going to be there, but it'll be managed because everyone is saying the same thing and helping guide the process. So Kevin, I just want to touch on a few things that oftentimes we hear from clients after they talk to Uncle Bob. And you've heard of these too. So just, I want to get your take on, what these issues mean to you and how you resolve them. So typically it's the VTB, it's the earnout, it's you're never going to get your money. VTBs do not exist. It's not commonplace. I would never do a deal with a VTB or earnout. Have you heard of these things before? How do you deal with these?
They come up all the time. And there's no one way to do a transaction. That's one of the things I love about transactions. They're very specific to the context, the risk tolerance, the relationships between the parties. But as we talked about earlier, when all the parties are together, there's a certain allocation of risk and reward. And in the example of Joe and Steve earlier, it was a really great striking of that risk and reward by the purchaser bringing some of their own money in, the bank funding, and the vendor leaving some on the table, taking some confidence or a confident position in what the purchaser could do. I think it more like a vendor take back as a show of confidence in the purchaser, what they can do with your legacy going forward. There is risk, but there's also security. whether it's guarantees, general security agreements, registrations of security interests, etc., that are subordinated to the bank, those happen. Those are normal. Earnouts we're seeing more and more as people try to fill the value gap between what they believe their business is worth and what the purchaser believes it's worth. It's quite often an earnout's a way to say, well, then bet on yourself. If you think it's worth that, help us fill that value gap. But conversations about VTBs or vendor takebacks and earnouts are normal. I wouldn't say that they're abnormal, but not every deal has one. Sometimes there are holdbacks as opposed to or escrows, where there's certain issues like tax issues or contract issues that we want to carve out some money for as security. But these conversations happen in tandem with advisors like yourselves and your team about how do we allocate that risk and reward. They're very normal to have, but if it's not there, you shouldn't be worried. It might just be that your deal doesn't fit for it.
Kevin, definitely great having you. You know, this is one of the pieces that is very passionate to me. I enjoy working with other professionals who are strategic minded, and thank you for your insight today.
Jim, our pleasure. Looking forward to working together again soon.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to the Selling Successfully podcast. And thanks to my guest, Kevin Fernandes. And Kevin, if folks want to get a hold of you, how do they do so?
Well, Jim, they can reach me at kfernandes, that's Fernandes with an S, at kmblaw.com, or by telephone at 905-276-0431. But check out our website as well. Fort Thomas website's got a lot of stuff. We have a lot of stuff. kmblaw.com. And you can check out the public square in the top right. We have a lot of articles on common legal issues and challenges and cool stuff that you can check out and learn more about what's going on around you.
For those of you interested, we've created key takeaways that you can download and access via our podcast page. Please remember to like or subscribe to keep this podcast handy, and we'll see you next time.